Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Lou TV, a special Thursday night edition. Special for two reasons. Tonight is the official kickoff of the NFL 2014 season, and I know that everyone has football fever and has been chomping at the bit. We've seen fights all over the forum about the smallest petty things, and that's when you know it's getting close to football season. The second reason why it's important is I think everyone, unless you've been living under a rock and following Lou Dogs on Twitter or social media, you know that Victriv is our newest sponsor, and I'm super excited tonight to have not only Logan Hitchcock with me, the world famous Logan Hitchcock, but also Mitch Mitchell, who is the CIO over at Victriv. And I spoke to this guy last week, and I knew right away that we had to get him online. We had to get his company onboarded with us. Just a fantastic mind, sports mind, data mind in general. So let me pause real quick and welcome these two gentlemen to the show. Mitch, how are things going out in Austin?
It's going great. Thanks, Adam. Really happy to be here, man. Excited for tonight and our launch.
Yeah, man, we are super excited to have you as well. Logan, how are things in Pittsburgh? I know you're getting back into the swing of school. Hopefully we're not keeping you from your studies. That's the last thing we'd want to do. We want to keep you moving towards the path of education. Daily fantasy sports is not the future for you. You're not a very good player. So we want to make sure you're making good grades. How are things in Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh's great. School's not so fun, but I'll focus on this stuff for the next half an hour and let that kind of escape my mind for the next few days as the weekend approaches.
Okay, very good. Yeah, and to Logan's point, this is just a half-hour show. And the reason we're only doing this for a half hour is because we want to give you guys plenty of time to get into the free roll that's going on tonight, the other contests that are going on at Victriv, and to familiarize yourself with their user interface and get some lineups submitted. I think if you look at the Lou Dogs Lou TV page up to the top right and below this video that you're watching right now, there are a couple banners that you can click on. That will take you straight to the Victriv site where you can get an account, get registered, and get into the game, the action tonight. I don't have the site up in front of me at this point. I don't know how many people were in the contest tonight, but the last time that I looked, it seemed, especially for a free roll, there's a lot of value in having a lineup over at Victriv tonight. So with that said, 30 minutes. Right now we've got 26 minutes remaining, and I want to get to the meat of the show, which is talking with Mitch about some of his background and what brought him to Victriv. So, Mitch, I'm going to flip this over to you. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you ended up at Victriv? It seems like this is a site that kind of burst on the scene out of nowhere. A couple days ago, no one was talking about you. 3 days later, you have 700, 800. I mean, I don't know what it's at now, maybe 1,000 new registrations. You guys have just flipped the switch on the product. You know, can you walk me through a little bit of your background and how you ended up working with a company that's kind of come out of nowhere into the DFS landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, we have a mini gong in the office that when we pass a user's threshold, we're banging the gong. So the gong's been going off pretty regularly. It's pretty exciting.
Nice.
So my background. Studied physics and finance in college, and went straight into consulting with. If anyone's familiar with Wolfram Alpha, but I was a director of technology at that company. It's very analytically driven, and so I was doing predictive analytics for my job. But my passion, my hobby, was doing that same thing in daily fantasy sports and the sports world in general. So I have a blog called the RotoQuant, and the RotoQuant was, nowhere on anybody's radar. It was just this little blog, often, this own thing I was doing by myself, just to track my own performance. And I had like 40 Twitter followers and like 100 people viewing the blog. And all of a sudden, I got a tweet from our CEO Matt, who had reviewed the blog and saw my background and was, excited to bring me on board because they were looking for someone with a strong analytics background to do their player pricing. And at Victriv, player pricing is one of the things we really want to hit on in terms of making the contest as sharp as possible in the player pricing model. So they brought me in, and it was as much of a whirlwind as spinning up Victriv has been to the public eye. it was that much for me as well, because 5 months ago I was doing something totally different. This wasn't on my radar. Living in Boise, Idaho, and now I'm down in Austin at this wonderful startup, and I feel like we're doing big things here.
That's incredible. Boise, Idaho. You must be a Boise State fan. Is that right?
You know it.
All right, good deal. All right, Victriv has a Boise State fan in the house. If any Boise State fans are out there tuning in, you got to play your money with the home team. All right, so go get an account of Victriv. So, can you talk to me a little bit? You know, I know that we had conversations last week, and we were talking about the sharp salaries and how they're predictive in nature. Can you talk to me a little bit about in the past how salaries have maybe played a role in daily fantasy sports and how you guys intend to change the game a little bit, especially for the newer users who probably represent the masses that I think daily fantasy sites are going after right now, that aren't the super skilled players that know where to do all the research, they know the sites to get involved with to get the the inside information or the edge on a game. How does pricing strategy help players like that? I think is what I'm really interested in when it comes to playing on the Victriv platform.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I would say player pricing is 50% art and 50% science, and you have to make a lot of decisions about what's important when you're pricing players. And so one thing looking out through the industry was recognizing that not every site tried to make the most predictive salaries, that is, salaries that correlated well with player performance. It was usually an effort to predict what the users were going to anticipate about how a player was going to perform, which is a subtly different thing. And so if you have an accurate pricing model, one thing that happens is the threshold for having a lot of skill in the game is sort of bumped up, so that someone can't just come in and read a couple forum posts and have a significant edge over someone who's a casual fan.
Sure.
It could never take away the skill edge of a user who is really in tune with what's happening and has been playing DFS for a long time and has their own statistical models and things. But for that new user, having really loose or not sharp salaries.
Sure.
One, I think it makes the game less fun. Roster creation is just not as fun when there's not a lot of decisions to make. And two, it makes them more likely to just come in and get rolled over because there's just some obvious flaws in the salary structure that are being taken advantage by everybody else.
Yeah, so Logan, let me ask you a question. I mean, do you feel like in the past that as this industry acquires new users and people who have maybe never played daily fantasy sports, do you feel like it's a real problem when the new guys come in and kind of get their lunch money taken and that money leaves the overall DFS industry prize pool? Do you feel like that's an issue of those guys never coming back? And can you see a scenario where sharper salaries, where if a new guy is maxing out his salary cap, is going to give him a better opportunity to stay in the game a little bit longer?
Yeah, in terms of, you put it really well with that analogy of somebody stealing somebody's lunch money. I mean, depending solely upon how much of a degenerate or whatever term you wish to use in that aspect, depending on how big of a degenerate you are or not. So if you lose your first time, you might be kind of so disgruntled and discouraged about the whole thing that you don't try it again. So I would say the large majority of people that come streaming into these sites, the guys that are just watching TV and see an ad, or you're scrolling through Yahoo and you see the FanDuel ad or something like that. Those guys that are just randomly doing that and clicking that, and then you lose, I think you quickly, really, really quickly lose interest in the whole thing, and
Sure.
You kind of go back to the season long where you have more than 1 week to kind of make up ground and then collect your money at the end or whatever, something like that. So in that regards, yeah, I think people are very quick to, make a judgment on daily fantasy sports as a whole. Now, on the other hand, if you're somebody that comes in and you do win, I mean, odds are you're going to continue to play until you might lose it and then say, okay, whatever, beginner's luck, something like that. So in the case of salaries, determining how interested a player might be or how fair it makes it, I think it's super important. When you make it, when you make it like that for everyone, and you take out those certain flaws that Mitch talked about in the player salary, and you make it almost, I don't want to use the word perfect because we're never going to be able to get it right, but when you make it as close to as you possibly can as in the predictive nature of what these guys might do, I just think it makes it easier on everybody because we're already formulating those predictive, what we predict them to do in our heads. So if the salaries are reflecting that, I think that's a really important thing that'll kind of go along with everybody.
Yeah, I think what's going to be interesting, and Mitch, I'll let you hit on this, but I noticed this as I was looking through some of your salary pricing, is when we do have those thoughts or those ideals in our head about a certain player and what he might do on any given Sunday, and the salary is much lower if we expect him to be an exceeds performer. I think that's going to be an interesting kind of head scratcher when you think about the predictive nature of the salaries that are going on at Victriv. So can you talk about that a little bit, Mitch? I mean, I don't know. You've got a guy maybe like AP or one of the top players, the top draft picks that you would typically see in a season-long league. Maybe at running back, I think especially is where you'll probably see this at Victriv, where their salary is much lower than you would expect it to be on a traditional daily fantasy sports site. Can you talk a little bit about about how and why some of those players' pricing is maybe not where we would expect it to be in our heads?
Yeah, sure. So we looked long and hard at this, and I use as many analytical methods as I have at my disposal to try to come up with predictive models. And one thing that kept popping out was that quarterbacks were just being pretty flagrantly underpriced in the DFS format. I think many season-long players realize, drafting quarterbacks in the first round is kind of a novice move. But the reasons for that has nothing to do with the points they score. It has to do with the needs you have for a roster over a season-long format. But on week in, week out, if you can just roster whoever you want, the quarterback position consistently puts up, the top 5 players are usually quarterbacks, right? Maybe a running back sneaks into that pool, but with much less consistency than the quarterback spot. So, yeah, you will see some of the skill positions that are more subject to injury or have much higher variance in their performance. The point of it is, as much as we think we can predict what a stud's going to do, you look through last year's performance, and the only guy that really was week in, week out, undeniably awesome, at the running back spot, for instance, Jamal Charles was a lock all last year. But every other running back, AP or Shady McCoy, they all had their ups and downs. So the variance is one part where we expect our studs to do well, but if they have a higher variance, they need to be punished for that because that's just not predictable. So hopefully the quarterbacks being a little bit higher isn't too annoying because you get to compensate by having Calvin and Jamal maybe on the same team or something.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned last year, Jamal Charles being the man, right? He was worth every penny of his salary on every DFS site. Are you only taking last year's performances into account? So how far back are you guys looking from a historical perspective and a matchup standpoint in determining some of the salaries that we're seeing are predictive?
That's a great question. And it's a nuanced question because the game itself, the NFL has changed dramatically. Even just we can already see with the preseason and the penalties. Hopefully it doesn't continue on to the regular season because that's just annoying. But looking back beyond more than say 5 years you're really comparing apples to oranges in terms of the types of numbers that people put up. So if you look at the running back numbers, they've decreased quite a bit compared to what a stud running back would be back in early 2000s. And it's just because they get a less of a workload because passing is just much more efficient these days for offenses. So we go back about 3 years. But the other thing that's interesting that we do is I don't want to give up too much of the ghost here, but there are stats that are easy to come by, and then there are stats that you kind of have to work hard to get at. And so, Stats LLC is usually the stats provider for a lot of our competitors and ourselves. and they're a great stats provider. But you can take what they give you and do, however many transformations you want on it to look at different averages, look at different things over different time spans, and we do a whole bunch of that kind of stuff to come up with what we're doing.
Very cool. Logan, you got anything to add there or ask?
You know what? I don't know if you have this plan to jump into, but I'm so anxious to hear more about it that I'm not going to wait any longer. So you can scratch it off your list. If you guys haven't already taken a look at the site, haven't messed with things or read the article or anything, first of all, you should do that. Secondly, if you're going to wait till after the show or do it now, you'll learn a little bit about, or you might see the tab that talks about the Victron, which I think is probably one of the most fascinating features, if not the most fascinating feature in all of daily fantasy sports. And I think
I agree. Fantastic.
I think it's crazy ingenuity and innovation all put into one thing. I can't really say enough about it, but for those of you who don't really know what it is, Mitch, I'd like you to expand on, kind of give everybody why you guys wanted to do this and what it is and what it does.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Logan. We're really excited about it too. So the Victron is a system of sliders that gives the user access to historical statistics that they might not otherwise be able to gather, and a user can set their preferences. So the stats they value most in a fantasy lineup, let's say passing yards, or they really value touchdowns, or they think the matchup is really, really important, they can set these settings in a series of sliders, and then that will set weights for us to go look into the statistical database, and we apply basically what's called the genetic algorithm. It's a fancy term for intelligent trial and error, to build out rosters that they're not necessarily better or worse than what anyone else might do in manual roster creation, but they serve as a starting point that favors those statistical categories that the user can then look at and go, oh, okay, I really like this guy and that guy. I don't so much like this other person, and I never thought of taking this tight end, or whatever. So I really encourage users to go check it out and just click over on the Victron tab and pick your favorite statistical category and slide one of those sliders and just see what comes out and just tweak it and play with it, and it'll make a bunch of recommendations for you and hopefully be very helpful in roster creation. But yeah, we've got a lot of good feedback on that feature.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. It's the first thing that jumped out at me and why I wanted to reach out right away, because I think we see a lot of daily fantasy sports sites coming into the market. They come into this space every single week, and we're always looking at them and saying, all right, what are you doing different? I think Logan probably asked Matt this in his interview he did earlier this week, maybe yesterday. But what are you doing that's different? And that's one of the things that jumped out right away. And I said, well, these guys are going to attack this from a different angle. They're going to provide new features, new functionality that we haven't seen yet. And I think it's fantastic. One question on Victron, I think it's great the way that it gives you a baseline roster setup based upon your preferences with the slider. Are there any plans in place to give you kind of the qualitative or quantitative reasoning behind each player and why the Victron gave you the results that it did? Or are we just looking at are we just going to be looking at players? So I mean, is there a reason why it gave you Steve Smith this weekend at Baltimore playing against the Carolina Panthers? Right? I mean, is it ever going to be that smart? And are you going to be able to progress and iterate on your model to get it to that point at some point?
Yeah. So just a general comment about the site. We're really pleased with where we've got. What the public can see now is the result of 4 or 5 months of development effort, and we have just a phenomenal team that was able to put this together so quickly. But we're not satisfied at all with where it's at, and we can't wait to we consider it maybe 30-40% of where we plan to be by the end of the year. So. A lot of the work has gone into putting baseline, must-have DFS infrastructure in place, and then a few of these extra features we really wanted, like the Victron. But one of the other major features that is coming down the line is, for instance, a research section. And if you look in the contest enter page, one thing we allow that I think is pretty unique and that more advanced seasoned DFS players will like is you can hover over the statistical categories like the opponent or the average fantasy points per game. You can get a description of what that category is, and then you can select a different category to slot in and then sort by that thing. So, really give the user a lot of leverage to look at whatever stat they want and sort of rank players in different ways that might not be possible. Integrating into that in the longer term will be an entire research section where users can basically create their own metrics and be slotting them into these things so that in the contest entry page they can have their custom metrics that they want to rate players on, sort them by those things, and create rosters in that way. So giving reasoning behind the Victron, that's one thing we want to reiterate is the Victron doesn't do thinking for you.
Right.
You have to set the sliders and you have to make the decisions of what comes out looks good or not. So you got to be aware of injury news. You got to be aware of a lot of things that are just part of the skill of the game. But yeah, there's a lot coming that's nowhere represented in the site right now that we're all really excited about.
Very, very, very cool. Logan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You have something to add?
No, I'm blown away by the whole thing, and I mentioned this before, and we've had a lot of other sites roll through that bring through a lot of really impressive features or things that we haven't seen before, but this one I think takes the cake. It's above and beyond anything that's available, on any DFS site. So.
Yeah, awesome. One thing I wanted to point out is if people are jumping in the free roll right now, it kicks off in a little bit here, is that there's a whole 3/4 of the site that the contest entry in the lobby, that's just one part of it, and that's what everyone can see right now. But our dashboard systems we're really excited about. Hopefully they don't blow up tonight during the real games. It's our first week here, but if you want an experience for sort of sweating your contest, being aware of what your athletes are doing and having different views of your action that you have going on, I think you guys will really, really like the dashboard contest. You have no idea what I'm talking about because no one has ever seen this, but to me it's as differentiating a factor as is the Victron in that we really want to bring the entertainment that daily fantasy sports can add to watching a football game to sort of the off-screen experience on your laptop. So be sure to check that out and have your dashboard up while the plays are going. In beta testing, we were seeing the dashboards update before the plays actually happened. So we've got a pretty fast real-time feed going as well. So.
Wow, that's interesting. So for all you sports bettors out there who love to do the live betting, just have a little bit of action going on at Victriv, and you can probably get ahead of the sports books and you guys can probably rake.
Let us know if that works. We might set some up ourselves.
There you go. Okay, guys, it's 35 minutes until the first kickoff of 2014. Again, the banners are on the Lou TV page. Make sure you click those. Go try out the Victron. Check out what these guys are talking about with their sharp salaries. They burst onto the scene, and I really want you guys to go and check them out and see what we saw in them very early. There's a lot of growth, I think, for this company, and speaking with the leadership, you're going to love playing here. They have a very product and player-centric focus, and I think that's something that will be apparent right away. And I don't really have anything else to throw out tonight. Logan, I don't know if you have anything else, but I'll flip it to you for a second.
No, I don't have much. I know just messing with the Victron and stuff, I have already set my free roll team for tonight, and I think it was solely produced by the Victron. So I'm going to test, just how victorious, I guess,
hey, there you go.
The Victron will be. So.
Hey, one question on the Victron. Does it make every effort to maximize your salary cap?
Not necessarily. So, if it thinks based on the stats categories you have that you're actually going with an optimal team for those stats below the salary cap, which is something that a lot of new DFS players don't realize could even be possible, right? It will stop you short if you're maximizing the stats you're looking at with those slider settings.
Very interesting. Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you want to make sure you mention or throw out there tonight?
Well, for our
the switch on
weekend, we do have 19,000 in guaranteed payouts going on the site. So 1,000 is kicking off tonight, but then for Sunday we've got a $50. It's actually let's see. $50, 150-man, and there's 1.5 thousand added in. So there's guaranteed overlay on that. You're not going to be penalized for getting in early. And then for the lower stakes players, there's a $10 that also has some guaranteed overlay in that. So please come check us out and jump in those free rolls. I think you'll have a good time.
All right, guys, you heard it. Get over there, get your account, get ready. NFL 2014 started tonight. Started off the right way. Go get an account at Victriv, not Victron, but use Victron. We're setting your line. Use Victron. The creation of Mitch Mitchell, the man behind the scene with the black magic. We're gonna leave for now. Go get our own roster set up. We're gonna go get a beer, maybe some popcorn. I don't know. Whatever you do to get ready for an NFL Thursday night football kickoff, go do it. And we will catch you on the flip side on the next Lou TV episode, so stay tuned. Mitch, thanks again for joining us, and give our props and best of luck to all the guys out in Austin. I know it's an exciting time for you. Logan, thanks as always, and that's all we got, fellas. Take care. Let's have a good one.